Mark, welcome to NTP. Why not click like and subscribe to our channel so we can let you know when other videos are released. Don't forget to check out our other free training videos, including Toolbox Talks and interesting, informative and useful videos. Now we're going to have a look at when the GB domestic hours rules apply and the requirements of these rules. Generally speaking, there's two main circumstances in which a driver of a goods vehicle operating solely within the UK will be in scope of the GB domestic rules. Firstly, if the vehicle or vehicle combination that they're driving has a maximum permissible mass of 3.5 tonnes or less. Secondly, if the vehicle has a maximum permissible mass in excess of 3.5 tonnes, but an exemption or derogation from the EU Drivers Hours regulations applies. There's quite a few exemptions and derogations, too many to cover here. You may need to ask advice if you wish to find out who the exemption or derogation actually applies to. Now, it's also worth bearing in mind that some groups are exempt from both the EU Drivers Hours and the GB Domestic Hours, so no Drivers Hours rules apply at all. Drivers of vehicles used by the armed forces, police, fire brigade, drivers who always drive off the public road system, and private driving, so not in connection with a job or in any way to earn a living, they're all exempt from all Drivers Hours rules. Now, GB domestic hours are set out differently to the EU rules, so let's have a little look at the definitions. Driving. Under the GB domestic hours rules, driving is defined as being at the controls of a vehicle for the purposes of controlling its movement, whether it's moving or stationary with the engine running, even for a short period of time. Duty. The whole period, whether driving or otherwise, during which the employee is at work, but excluding breaks or rest. Now, for owner drivers, duty means the time spent driving a vehicle connected with their business or doing any other work connected with the vehicle and its load. The week. A week is defined in the same way under domestic rules as the EU week, so the fixed period between the first thing Monday to the last thing Sunday. And the day. A day is not the same fixed period as it is for the EU rules, but for the purposes of the domestic rules in plain language, it's defined as the 24-hour period beginning when the driver starts work. Now, what about the limits on the GB domestic hours? Well, the maximum daily driving limit is 10 hours per day. The daily driving limit applies to driving on and off the public road, unless the driver never drives on the public road system, in which case they're exempt from the domestic rules, as mentioned earlier. Agriculture, quarrying, forestry, building works, civil engineering, then the off-road driving counts as duty time rather than driving time. Your daily duty limit. In any working day, the maximum daily duty permitted is 11 hours. If you don't drive, you're exempt from the daily duty limit. If a driver drives for 4 hours or less on each day of the week, they're also exempt from the daily duty limit. Breaks and rest. Bizarrely, the domestic rules contain no specific requirements for breaks or rest. However, bear in mind that a 13-hour daily rest period is actually implied by the fact that the maximum daily duty time is 11 hours. So 24 hours less 11 hours duty time gives you 13-hour rest period. Now, employed drivers working under GB domestic hours are affected by certain provisions of the amended version of the Working Time Regulations 1998. Their weekly working time must not exceed an average of 48 hours over the reference period, which is normally 17 weeks, although individuals can opt out completely of that, and the reference period may be extended by workforce or collective agreement. And also, workers should have adequate rest, defined as regular rest periods that are sufficiently long and continuous to ensure that workers do not harm themselves, fellow workers or others, and that they do not damage their health in the short or long term. Now, these provisions only apply to employed drivers, not to self-employed persons. The definition of a self-employed person in the context of the 1998 regulations is someone running their own business and free to work for different clients and customers. Now, both driving and duty limits are suspended for the duration of an emergency. And an emergency is defined as where events cause or are likely to cause any of the following: danger to life or health of people or animals, Serious interruption in the maintenance of public services for the supply of water, gas, electricity or drainage, telecommunication, postal services, or in the use of roads, railways, ports or airports. Or serious damage to property. Now, if affected by an emergency, the driver should enter details of the event on their record sheet so as they've got it with them. Lastly, how about if you're mixing GB domestic hours and EU drivers hours? Let's have a little look at the facts surrounding that. Now, some drivers spend some of the time on EU regulated operations and some on work that comes under the GB domestic rules. Where this occurs, the driver may elect to follow the EU rules all the time, even on work when domestic hours would normally apply. And that's by far the easier way. But they may decide to follow each relevant set of rules depending on the type of work that they carry out. Now, if the latter option is chosen, the EU rules always take precedence over the domestic ones. The following points must be observed. 1. Time spent operating under EU rules cannot count as a break or rest under domestic rules. For the purposes of GB domestic records, the EU work must be recorded as either driving or other duty as appropriate. 2. Time spent operating under GB domestic rules counts as other work under EU drivers' hours, must be entered manually into the tachograph or recorded manually on a tachograph printout as other work, not treated as break or rest under the EU rules. 3. Driving under GB domestic and EU rules takes place on the same day. The combined total driving hours must not exceed the domestic limit of 10 hours and the combined total duty time must not exceed the 11 hours. 4. On days when any time is spent under EU rules, the driver must take breaks and a daily rest period in accordance with the EU drivers' hours rules. And lastly, number 5, at the end of a week when any time is spent under EU rules, the driver must also take an EU weekly rest period. There we go. Complicated GB domestic drivers' hours in a nutshell. Thanks for watching this video covering GB domestic hours. Don't forget to click like and subscribe so we can let you know when new videos are uploaded. Check out our other free training videos, including Toolbox Talks and interesting, informative and useful videos. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.